When people talk about types of characters, two words that come up pretty often are protagonist and antagonist. Now, you might think that those are synonyms for hero and villain, and sometimes that's a pretty good working definition, but in other instances, that can be an oversimplification. For instance, sometimes the main character is a really horrible person. You might hate them, you might be rooting against them, but they're still the focus of the story. Shakespeare's Richard III and Macbeth are pretty classic examples of this. On the other hand, sometimes the antagonist is not really a bad person, but they're still the opponent of the hero in some way. A really good modern example of how complex this can be is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. In The Hunger Games, Katniss is the main character, so she's the story's protagonist. And while she's something of an anti-hero, she's definitely a better person than the story's villains. Where it gets complicated is that most of the story's antagonists are not really villains. Because of the way the Hunger Games work, there are 23 other teenagers, most of whom were selected against their will, who stand between Katniss and her desire to return home. While a few, like Rue and Peeta, become her allies, the majority are her enemies just out of necessity. However, even the career tributes, the worst of her enemies in the arena, are just really brainwashed teenagers who are also victims of the Capitol. There's a scene in Catching Fire where Katniss is reminded to remember who the real enemy is, and she immediately understands that it's the Capitol and President Snow, not the people in the other districts. In Book 2, Catching Fire, it's unclear for most of the book who she can and can't trust. This time around, she interacts with other Hunger Games victors and Capitol residents, who are all planning things they haven't let her in on. Since both Katniss and the reader are kept in the dark until the end, almost every character is a potential antagonist, but none except for President Snow are the real enemy, particularly since the new head game maker turns out to be in on the rebellion's plans. Mockingjay only makes it more complicated, with the leader of District 13 turning out to be a wannabe dictator, potentially just as bad as President Snow. She's on Katniss's side, and she needs Katniss's help, so she's not a traditional antagonist. However, she crosses the line when she suggests continuing the Hunger Games using children from the Capitol, and definitely qualifies as a villain. And then, of course, there's The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I don't actually own a copy of. I rented that from the library. But in any case, it's a prequel where the future President Snow is the main character. So in that case, that's a full-fledged villain-protagonist scenario similar to Macbeth or Richard III or maybe the Star Wars prequels. In any case, I hope this helped to clarify the difference between hero-villain and protagonist-antagonist a little bit. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more like it, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I post once a week talking about reading, writing, literary concepts, and more.